Ras Baraka. Ras Baraka, our mayor-elect. Ras Baraka, our mayor-elect. Ras Baraka. Such a applause.
Go, Mr. Mayor.
Good afternoon. So I want to thank all of you folks out here for participating and involving yourself in a very historic and important election that just took place May 13th. And I appreciate the support that's out here today and the love. But we have a lot of work to do.
Yes, we
So this is it's not about, people who know me closely, I don't like idol worship. So it's not about me. I'd rather you yell your own name than yell mine. So the idea is we need you to get ready to get to work, right? That's what we become mayor means. It means we have a lot of work to do. So let's do what we need to do in order to move this city forward. So I want to thank Deborah Smith Gregory, Kalina Berryman, Julius Williams, all the folks that are associated with making this happen today. Of course, the young people here, the students who have been on the front lines of this for a very long time. And somebody asked me, a reporter asked me, I guess they were trying to be smart and said, so we saw you out there with those students. Does this mean that under your leadership, there are going to be more protests like this every day? Well, I said, hopefully if we're doing the right thing under my leadership, we won't have to have those protests. But the reality is you should never be ashamed of organizing and raising your voice and protesting and marching. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't have any of the things that we enjoy today without all of those things. It always interests me that the people who benefited the most from protests are the ones that are adamant about not having it, which is nonsensical to me. That folks actually marched for you to be able to enjoy the rights that we enjoy today, and now you're opposed to people speaking their voice and marching. You can't believe in democracy only a little bit. You can't believe in democracy only when it favors you. You have to believe in it all the time. When I was arrested fighting for people for the right to speak at the council meeting, so I can't be angry at the people who come to the council meeting now and say negative things about me. I can't say now that we don't want the right to speak anymore simply because they're talking about me. Right? And so that means we have to be for democracy all of the time. And if young people feel like they need to protest because of something that I did wrong, then they have the right to do that. And we ought to uphold that right all of the time. That's important. And we have to understand that. And don't allow people to say, you're too raucous, you're too loud. The conversation has always been about this. So they want to deter you away from what the real issues are. So they concentrate on the fact that people are making noise at the school board meetings. And I made an analogy to, if you put your hand over someone's mouth, they're going to scream louder because you're trying to muffle what it is that they're trying to say. If you took your hand away from their mouth, then they could speak in a normal tone. But because you are suppressing people's engagement or their right to have a voice, then people are going to scream louder than normal. As a matter of fact, oppression makes a wise man mad. And so if you are not experiencing what you should be experiencing, then you ought to speak out. If somebody is hitting you, then you scream. When a baby is in pain, their natural instinct is to raise their voice. Right? When a baby is not being fed, their natural instinct is to scream and to cry. If you're being oppressed and you're not screaming and crying, then something is wrong with you, and you're having an abnormal response to stimulus that is happening to you. So I'm just saying that to say, hold the line and stand in the gap. So we're 60 years, I'm supposed to be talking about this, I'm sorry I veered away a little bit. We're 60 years away from the first Brown versus Board of Education landmark decision that was passed in 1954, which makes it apropos that we're talking about education now, today, in the city of Newark and all over the country. In 1954, we realized that education in America was separate and unequal. There were two people, Kenneth and Mamie Clark, Dr. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, who did a study to prove that people were being adversely affected psychologically by the segregation of schools, that it was teaching one group of people that they were inferior and another group of people that they were superior. And as a result of that, they went to court. Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall and a few people from my alma mater, Howard University, went to court and the NAACP to fight segregation in public schools. And as a result of that, we got the landmark decision, Brown versus Board of Education, 60 years ago today, which is not a very long time. And after that, they had Brown 2, all deliberate speed. And they came up with other legislation to bus people into schools to actually desegregate school districts because, and I know some of you know more about this than me because you actually participated in it. But I'm just talking from books that I read.
I was bused.
And stories that I've heard. But the reality is, we are still in the same place 60 years later that we were in 1954. We're in this. Most of our schools are still grossly segregated.
Yes.
Rutgers University came out with a study that showed that most of Newark school students are segregated twice. They're segregated by nationality and race, and they're segregated by poverty. And these are things that we have to deal with. And people are talking about school reform without addressing the fact that these schools are segregated economically and racially. Right. As a matter of fact, in the state of New Jersey, most of the schools in the state are segregated. Most of the schools in this county are segregated. Segregated by resources, more importantly by riches and economic wealth and growth and access to curriculum, and segregated by nationality. So we oftentimes talk about segregation by race, but there's also a deeper segregation that goes on in school. This is segregation by wealth and resources, and more importantly, curriculum. Which means that they're teaching or giving kids access to a different curriculum in some neighborhoods than we have in our neighborhoods. There's different kinds of training for teachers in our neighborhood and training for teachers in other neighborhoods. The access is different. And so these are the things that we have to be speaking about, correcting and fixing. So when we're talking about a strategy to improve education for our students in Newark, the strategy cannot ignore poverty. It cannot ignore the kind of national oppression that's going on. It cannot ignore those things. In fact, we have to speak to those things in order to improve the kind of education that our kids are receiving. Somebody talked about it. You cannot ignore the fact that kids come to school hungry, but more importantly, without housing or decent housing. And something that nobody talks about is about the levels of violence that kids have to grow up experiencing that some psychologists are beginning to say has a direct effect on their ability to grasp new information. That's important because we've already had studies on post-traumatic stress, but we can't define our kids under the banner of post-traumatic stress because post means that it's over. And the things that our kids are going through is not over.
That's right.
It's happening every single day, and so they have to experience it over and over and over again. And so we have to keep those things in mind when we talk about improving the educational system in our city. And we cannot have people that are in charge who are not sympathetic or who do not think that those things are relevant to the specific issues that we have in this community and in this city. We cannot have folks in charge who think completely that all of the problems that come to our school can be solved alone by one teacher that's in their face. That we have to have a comprehensive program that begins to address all of the social issues that our society has refused to address. If you read Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, he talks specifically about how we're going to pay in the back end what we have not paid in the front end.
That's right.
So because we have not educated our children and provided the resources that we need in education to fix these kind of problems that our society has. We're going to pay for it in jail. We're going to pay for it in social services. We're going to pay for it in welfare. We're going to pay for it in all of these things because we refuse to equalize education in America. We refuse to equalize economic despair in America. We refuse to fix the social issues in America. So we're going to pay for it in another kind of way. And so we have to address it straightforward and in a comprehensive way. I'm sorry to bore you this morning with all
We're
this.
not bored.
Go ahead and teach.
We're not bored.
Go ahead and teach.
But ultimately, this issue of education is more than a building. The fight that they want to tell you that school reform is about whether we co-locate a building or whether we put you out of this building or close the school, none of that has absolutely anything to do with reforming schools at all. That is about real estate. It is about other folks trying to muscle in whatever it is that you have. Improving kids' education has more to do with what we're offering them in the classroom, the curriculum that we arrange for them, the access to what they have after school, the access to what they have in terms of early childhood, how we are giving access to their parents to literacy, how we're improving the quality and the conditions of their family's life, how we're making their neighborhood safe. All of those things have more to do with educating your child than anything else that's being debated in the press and being debated every day on Channel 7, 4, and 2. These people spent $4 million in this campaign not to improve education for your child in school, but to take over education for your child in your school. So I'm happy to be here to talk. I'm happy to give me a platform. You know, Brown versus Board of Education is important. Education is the last, in my estimation, one of the last unfinished civil rights that we have not completely attained in this country. Is part of the unfinished democratic struggle that we have around economic equality, but also education is involved in that totally and completely. So I say keep up the fight, hold the line, stand in the gap. Whatever it is that we have to do to make sure that our kids are getting a quality education in every school that's open in this city. Our kids need a quality education in every school that they sit down in this city. We need to make sure that they get a quality education in every single school that they sit down in. And we need to make sure that we have neighborhood schools. In a democracy, it is the right. It is not a privilege. Education is a right. It is not a privilege. And that is one of the tenets that was fought in Brown versus Board of Education. Education is a right. It is not only for a privileged few. In a democracy, everybody has the right to a decent and quality and full education. And so it is our job to provide that to every person that steps foot on the soil of America, every single individual, whether they immigrate, no matter what nationality they have, what food they eat, what language they talk, what music they like. Every American has a right to a decent and affordable education, a free and public education. And every person that steps foot on our soil, whether they have a damn green card or not, deserve a public education, and democracy provides that for all of us. It provided that for all of us. It provided that for ex-slaves. It provided that for immigrants. And we cannot say now, because we came in out of the cold, that we should provide education for people who just came to the United States yesterday. Everybody deserves the right to have a decent education. And public school provides that. Public school provides that. So let's fight to keep public schools open, not to close them, to reform them, to make them better, and to keep the struggle of Brown versus Board of Education alive. God bless you. God keep you.
Thank you, Mayor-elect Ras J. Thank you, Mayor-elect remember one of the things that he said. He said throughout the campaign, when I become mayor, we become mayor. That's not just a slogan.
That's right.
That means that we cannot vote and then go away. We have work to do. This is not something that he can do by himself.
That's right.
He cannot do this alone. Just a little housekeeping.